Morning, Year 4. It's Miss Brandon here reading the next part of Beetle Boy. If you're reading along at home, this is chapter 11, page 158, and we are halfway down the page. Thursday and Friday after school, Darkus, Bertolt and Virginia worked on base camp. They drew a map of the furniture forest and taped it to the back of a wardrobe, marking each booby trap they'd built around the perimeter to warn them if hostile forces approached, and hooked up an alarm system made of bottle tops threaded on strings, which jangled when a trap was set off. The days quickly passed in a flurry of scavenging, building and planning. Newton had made a permanent home in Bertolt's hair, and a trail of fireflies, Newton's friends and family, had followed the beetle out of the Emporium and into base camp. When Saturday morning arrived, Bertolt and Virginia met outside the Emporium. "You're wearing a bow tie." "Well, don't you like it?" Bertolt looked at his chest. "It's a bit smart, isn't it?" "Well, it goes in my tank top." Bertolt looked over his glasses disapprovingly at her clothes. Virginia looked down at her red tracksuit. It was pale and baggy at the knees, a hand-me-down from her sister Serena. She pushed Bertolt towards the Emporium doorway. "Come on, hurry up and open the door before someone sees us." They let themselves in with the key, creeping through the shop and out onto the other side of the furniture forest. Once in the tunnels, they followed the already familiar path to base camp. Its higgledy-piggledy walls glowed and sparkled as thousands of fireflies greeted them by illuminating the dangling chandelier crystals that Bertolt had stitched to the tarpaulin ceiling. Virginia lifted the oil lamp down from the shelves, placing it on the table and lighting the wick. Bertolt settled down at his workbench, an ironing board propped up on crates, and Virginia sat down on the sofa with Darkus's books on beetles. "This is really interesting," she said. "But do you think Darkus has read it all?" "I don't know. Why?" Bertolt was working on a new booby trap. The grandfather clock's pendulum was to be installed in the tunnel beyond a fold-away table, and rigged to swing down and clobber anyone following the person who triggered it. "Well, there's a bit here." Virginia paused. "What?" Bertolt put down his screwdriver. "It's about the average lifespan of a beetle." Virginia frowned. "It's not very long." Bertolt looked up at Newton and the cloud of fireflies flickering and fizzing above his head. "I don't want to know," he said, picking his screwdriver back up. Virginia sighed, putting the book down, and went over to the collage of newspaper articles and magazine cuttings they'd taped to the wardrobe above the map. They were all about the Kreischer Cutter. She stared at a photo of Novak and her mother on a red carpet. "I wonder how Darkus is doing. He should be at Towering Heights by now." "I still think we should have gone with him," Bertolt said. "Me too," Virginia agreed, "but he didn't want us to." Darkus got off the bus at Regent's Park and walked alongside the railings. To his left, trees and parkland stretched towards the entrance of London Zoo. On the opposite side of the road were grand detached white houses, some with names and some with numbers. He walked along until he came to a tall, imposing townhouse with Towering Heights written all over the gates. And he suddenly realised that he had no idea what he was going to say to Novak Cutter. There was a wall in front of the property about the same height as Darkus. Beyond it, the house was surrounded by a copper beech hedge at least 8 feet tall. There was an intercom on the gatepost to let people in. Through the gate, a white gravel driveway veered to the left of the house. The front garden to the right was paved black and white, like a man-sized chessboard, and a glossy black door was framed by enormous flower pots bursting with red lilies. Darkus paced up and down, talking to himself, trying to think of a good way to ask Novak Cutter if her mum had kidnapped his dad. All sorts of ridiculous sentences came out of his mouth. He cursed himself for not practising on Virginia and Bertolt. He crossed over the road and looked through the bars of the gate. He couldn't even think of something to say into the intercom. This was not good. He'd have to go back to base camp and ask Virginia and Bertolt what to do. He took 2 steps towards the bus stop and froze. Ahead, and coming straight towards him, were Pickering and Humphrey, dressed in ridiculous yellow and purple suits. Without thinking, Darkus pulled himself up on top of the wall and dropped down to the other side, into the copper beech hedge surrounding Towering Heights. He could hear the cousins arguing. "You better not ruin this for me, Humphrey. Shut it, Pickers, or I'll change my mind about bringing you." "We had a deal. I got your door open, didn't I?" Darkus held his breath as the voices approached. His neck was being scratched by the shrubbery, but he didn't dare move. He heard the buzz of the intercom and the two men saying their names. The black door opened silently, and a butler with dark, slicked-back hair and a mournful face came out. He walked stiffly and steadily to the gate. "We have an appointment to see Lucretia Cutter," Humphrey shouted. "Monsieur Gamble and Monsieur Risk, yes, I know," the butler replied in a French accent. Now that he was closer, Darcus could see that he had dark circles under his grey eyes. "That's right," Humphrey puffed up his chest, and Pickering nodded eagerly. The butler opened the gate by keying in a number, and the cousins followed him through the front door, which closed behind them. Darcus wriggled out onto the other side of the copper beech hedge, covered in scratches. He stood facing the house. Coming here alone had been a mistake. He needed to get back to base camp. He ran to the gate, but it was closed. He tugged at the bars in frustration. He'd either have to climb it or go back through the hedge, getting even more scratched. He was halfway up the gate when he heard the door behind him open, and a voice. "You, boy!" Darcus froze. It was a French accent. The butler had come back. "Come down!" Darcus did as he was told, but didn't turn around. "Her ladyship will see you now." Darcus looked over his shoulder. "Me?" "Yes, you." "But I don't have an appointment," he stammered. "You don't need one. You're being invited in." The butler's face was a blank. His sad eyes didn't blink. "Come on, boy. Don't you know you shouldn't keep a lady waiting?" Darcus dragged his feet towards the door of Lucretia Cutter's house, his heart hammering against his ribcage. And that's the end of chapter 11. Have a look tomorrow for chapter 12.